The pediatric respiratory therapist said she had never seen a dog do what their dog had done. She said it quietly, at the end of a very long night, and neither of them had the words to respond. Everything looked normal that morning. It wasn't. Theo was 11 weeks old. He had been home from the hospital for 9 of those weeks. Small and loud and perfect in the way that new things are perfect. Demanding and complete. Their Bernese Mountain Dog, Atlas, had met him on the first afternoon home. He had sniffed the blanket. He had lain down beside the bassinet. He had, by every measure Vivienne and her husband Cole could apply, accepted the new arrangement. For the first 3 weeks, nothing changed. Atlas slept in the hallway between their bedroom and the nursery the way he always had. He ate his meals at the regular time. He came when called. He was, in the vocabulary the dog trainer had used when they adopted him 2 years ago, a settled animal. Then, on a Thursday in the 4th week, he stopped eating his evening meal. Vivienne noted it. Cole said dogs missed meals sometimes. She put the bowl back down at 9 p.m. He stood over it for a long moment and walked away. He went to the nursery door and lay down in front of it with his chin on his paws. She thought. Separation anxiety. She had read about it. The older dog who feels displaced by the new baby. She felt a small wash of guilt and made a mental note to spend more time with him in the morning. The next morning, Atlas didn't circle the yard the way he normally did. He followed Vivienne through the house, room to room, and when she went into the nursery to change Theo, he positioned himself against the wall beside the changing table and watched. Not the baby. Vivienne, as if he were waiting for her to do something she hadn't done yet. Cole watched from the doorway and said, "He's jealous of the baby. That's all this is." Vivienne was an administrative coordinator at a medical imaging center. She had no clinical training, but she had worked in healthcare for 11 years, and she had developed the particular skill of people who work adjacent to medicine. She noticed when things were slightly off in ways she couldn't immediately name. She couldn't name this. She filed it. By day 3 of the new behavior, Atlas had added something. When she carried Theo through the house, Atlas walked directly ahead of them. Not behind, not beside, ahead. And stopped at each doorway as if checking it before she entered. It was so deliberate that Cole laughed the first time he saw it. "He's her bodyguard," he said. "Like a Secret Service dog." They were both laughing. That's important. That detail would matter later. The 4th night, Atlas woke them at 2:51 a.m., not barking. A sound Vivienne had never heard from him. Sustained. Low. A vocalization that wasn't quite a whine, and wasn't quite anything else. Cole said from beside her, "He needs to go out." She was already up. She opened the hallway door. Atlas did not move toward the back door. He turned and walked to the nursery. She followed him. Theo was in his bassinet on his back, eyes closed. He looked asleep. The room was at 71 degrees. The humidifier was running. Everything on the monitor read normal. She stood in the doorway for 4 seconds watching the regular, shallow rise and fall of his chest. But Atlas was at the bassinet rail, pressing his nose to the fabric, working in slow, methodical sweeps from the foot toward the head. Not frantic, systematic. Like something a person does when they're looking for something specific. She crossed the room and picked Theo up. The limpness was the thing. Not traumatic, just slightly more than sleep. His head lolled 1 inch further than it should have. His temperature felt right, but his color under the nightlight was wrong in a way she could not have articulated clinically, and did not need to. She had worked in healthcare for 11 years. She called for Cole, and she called 911, and she did both in the same breath. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The respiratory therapist who assessed Theo in the ambulance, a woman named Delia Ose, 12 years in pediatric emergency transport. Used the phrase that would stay with Vivienne for the rest of her life. She said, "This baby has been working too hard to breathe." At the children's hospital, the attending confirmed RSV bronchiolitis progressing to respiratory distress. Theo's oxygen saturation had been dropping incrementally over 3 to 4 days in a pattern that produced no fever, no dramatic symptoms, no indicator that a consumer baby monitor was equipped to detect. His body was compensating, working harder and harder for the same amount of air. The compensation is what masks the danger. By the time compensation fails, the window is very small. Dr. Yolanda Briggs, pediatric pulmonology, said to them in the morning, "The 4 days your dog was behaving strangely, that's the 4 days this was building," she said. "I have had families in this room who waited to come in." She didn't finish that sentence. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. Atlas had been tracking the change in Theo's breath for 4 days. RSV in an infant alters the volatile organic compound profile of exhaled air in ways that fall far below human olfactory detection. Dogs process those compounds through a sense system built from 300 million receptors compared to our 6 million. What Atlas smelled on that first Thursday was not what he smelled on Monday. The gap between those two readings was growing. He stopped eating. He positioned himself at the nursery door. He walked ahead of them through the house because the thing he was monitoring was moving in the wrong direction, and he did not know how to make them understand it. The night he woke them, the gap had reached a threshold. His body made a decision his vocabulary couldn't. Theo was discharged 6 days later. He came home with a pulse oximeter that clips to his foot, and a follow-up appointment with pulmonology, and a Bernese Mountain Dog who lay down beside his bassinet, and exhaled once, and stayed. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe, so you never miss the next one. Cole put the uneaten dog bowl away. He sat on the kitchen floor with Atlas and said nothing for a long time. Atlas put his chin on Cole's knee. They stayed that way until the sun came up, and Theo made the sounds that meant he was awake. "I'm ready for the world." And Atlas rose without being asked, and walked down the hall ahead of them both. Next week, a Labrador retriever who refused to let a grandmother leave the house, and the test result that came back 4 hours later.